to epic sages where your journey begins. Our shelves are stacked high where the magic never ends. From dice that roll true to tomes ancient and wise, we've got all the essentials for your game to arise. With adventure in mind, we craft every piece to make your campaigns flourish, your stories increase. For every TTRPG dream, our stock is refined. Come find your next quest, leave the mundane behind. Epic sages, where you find satisfaction. We bring us blood, you bring compassion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic sages, we legends like traction. Our online stores are wonderland, easy to explore. With service that shines, whether in person or more. Need advice on your journey? We're here to assist. For novice and veteran, no wish will be missed. We've got what you need, from the basic to the grand, to bring your world to life with a masterful hand. From maps that expand to characters that bind, Epic Sages always with adventure in mind. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. We bring the spark, you bring the passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, legends find traction. Elevate your game with custom pieces so fine, handcrafted with care, designed to make you shine. From miniature heroes to landscapes vast, we build every detail to make the magic last. When the final dice is rolled and the journey is done, we offer keepsakes that remind you of the battles you won. In every treasure we offer, memories are signed. Epic Sages, always with adventure in mind. Epic Sages, where you find satisfaction. We bring us blood, you bring compassion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, we legends find traction. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. We bring us blood, you bring the passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, we legends find traction.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to tonight's show. Episode 30. For real this week. We called last week episode 30, and I realized when I was uploading the video that this one's 30. My bad. But tonight's topic is, hey, I see what you did there. We're talking about how to incorporate characters' backstories into the stories that you're telling, right? Players' backstories into the stories that you're telling. We are joined by a plethora of guests tonight. Everyone showed up. I'm very excited. Wahaha. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, where you can find them, all their fun stuff, what they're about. We're going to start down at the bottom there with Blue. Hey, subscriber. Thanks for subscribing.
All right. My name is Lou Bowers. I am a social media marketer. I help small businesses get eyeballs on their offers because no one can buy from the best kept secret. And you can find me pretty much everywhere as Lou Bowers.
Fantastic. Another subscriber. Also, thank you. All right. Jumping over to Rebecca.
Hey, everybody. I'm Rebecca Bratspees. I'm a law professor in New York City, and I write about environmental justice in particular and about climate change. And I'm also an amateur historian. I write about New York City history. You can find me on pretty much every channel as R. Bratspees. My last name is Bratspees, so at R. Bratspees is me.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And last but not least, Ode.
Hey, I'm Odie. I'm with Alpha Productions. I specialize in creating graphic novels. You can find me on Instagram at Eyeball Productions, also on Facebook at the same tag.
Fantastic. Okay, well that's the quick and easy. You guys blew through that so fast. I was supposed to tie for like 40 minutes. Come on now. No, just play it. But let's kind of just jump straight into the topic for tonight, right? So we're talking about backstories and incorporating them into the stories you tell, because all of us here are storytellers, right? On at least a most basic level. A couple of us are published authors, but that's a whole different ball of wax. For the stories that we tell people and go through things, you got to start somewhere, right? And sometimes you draw ideas from the people that you're interacting with, right? Particularly in the TTRPG genre, it's a huge part of your storytelling, right? Being very involved with what you do. But that's not necessarily the case for everybody. So, starting with Odie, where do you draw your inspiration from to make the stories for your characters when you're doing your stuff?
At first, I start with the actual character itself, because I feel like if you don't have a character that actually fits your plot, it can throw off your story. I feel like it will take away what you're trying to build the storyline if you don't have a character that can uniquely not only fit that story but carry it on. So I feel like developing your character to be the centerpiece will help out a lot because I mean a plot could be changed, it could be fixed, but when you create a character, you want to create a character that's going to be memorable. So giving them the qualities, giving those certain characteristics that's going to develop later on in the story is very important to me. So I draw inspiration as in how can I make this character great and memorable versus the plot because I feel like without that you kind of get lost because most times you watch a show, you remember characters, remember what they do, how they sound. So I feel like to me that's the most important.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot I'm going to touch on later with that because that hits a lot of our base points. But a really key point I'm going to steal from that time meow is the having a solid baseline, right? Even before the story or plot is made, you need to have good characters to populate it, right?
Mhm.
To kind of transition over to Rebecca, you don't necessarily have to make characters. You get to see real ones in real life. Can you tell me how your process kind of works when you're building and crafting your stories?
Yeah, so I also want to say that I make environmental justice comic books where we are starting more with the characters. But for my, my work as a law professor or my work as a historian, I'm starting with things in the world, and then what I'm trying to do is trying to add sort of texture and humanity and tell authentic stories about people who are in a particular place at a particular time facing whatever challenge they're facing. A lot of times legal narratives skip over that part and they just talk about the legal question and they don't talk about who's there and what matters to them and why they're involved in whatever fight they're involved in. And I think that makes it, first of all, much more interesting, but also, as a teacher, I feel like it really helps the students understand what's at stake and remember that what's at stake is people and their lives.
Okay, I like that you used the word adding texture because I feel like that is going to be again touched on a little bit later. Because you're right, IRL we do tend to gloss over that quite a bit. Jumping down to Blue, Miss Lou, when you're dealing with your clients and whatnot, can you kind of tell me how you take their lives and their backstories and make them the character of their own destiny? We'll use that. That
Yeah,
sounds exciting.
absolutely. There's a couple of ways. When you are marketing, it's great to have your ideal client be the hero of the story as opposed to, and you are like the sage that guides them along. And so that really plays into creating that ideal client avatar, and figuring out how do they think, what do they want, where are they eating lunch, do they have a cat, are they plant people, gathering all of that nitty gritty information. And some of it might seem irrelevant, but the more you know about who you're talking to and can really figure out how they're thinking and what their pain points are, the easier it is to create a really clear, amazing message.
Nice. Okay. I really like that. And again, all three of you have brought up very distinct and important pins for this topic. So I appreciate all of you. Younger, jumping over to you. When we're talking on the TTRPG side of things, what is the least important part of the backstory?
The least important part of the backstory. I would say it really depends on the style of gameplay you're going to do. Some people are just like, backstory simply provides a mechanical benefit to your character. It doesn't really have any further impact, which I think is terrible. So when you say the least important, I don't like how you directed that. I guess it would probably be the mechanical bits because in Dungeons and Dragons in particular, like most of the features you get from that are relatively trash and or ignored. So I would say that's the least important because you can use the storytelling bits like, oh, you're a sailor. Okay, well, I'm going to assume then that if I was a sailor, I can navigate the ocean on a boat. It's a part of my backstory. I think we can incorporate that into the story in the future. Even though there's not a mechanical precedence necessarily, It's a dialogue based. It's like, hey, here's the historical context to my character's ability.
Again, applying texture to a story, right? So kind of jump into that, right? Is the understanding of why we want a backstory, right? Why we want to understand who we're dealing with, and as they're driving the plot forward and things like that. While we're setting up that baseline that we talked about, we have to understand why they're doing what they're doing. If they're a good guy, a bad guy, whoever they are, we need to know how they got there, and not necessarily in the beginning, God created light, kind of know how they got there, but go forward to the important bits that mattered, right? Something that are key plot points to the character themselves before they hit other key plot points. Because you guys all know the hero story, right? Very rarely do the heroes in the hero story have very interesting backgrounds. Besides, every once in a while they get to be a cool wizard that the rest of the wizards get marked and they get revenge. Whatever, right? Jumping down to Lou really quick. When you're dealing with your clients, what do you think is your favorite thing to focus on to figure out that important underlying story that you're trying to get to with your clients?
My favorite thing to focus on with clients, it's their reason why. Like,
Okay.
why are they doing what they do? And then really with that ideal client avatar that I talked about, like why do they need the thing? But the also the other thing with clients is like the positioning and why should we do business with you as opposed to someone else?
Okay, interesting. Jumping up to Odie. Odie, same kind of question for you. What is your favorite part of discerning your characters' stories, or at least the backstories, before you get to the actual story you want to tell? What's your favorite part about discovering who they were before you started?
So I'd say that it's important because you have to know where to place a backstory.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like sometimes people make the mistake of trying to give too much information way too early. So
Okay.
it kind of like blands out the character itself because you know too much about him. He doesn't have time to progress and grow for you to see like, okay, why does he have these certain characteristics? So I feel like sometimes people try to force that backstory in way too early instead of let it flow. And then it gets to a certain point where then now you know more. Like for instance, like my main character of my manga, his name is Juno. For him, he's a simple farmer that's a hunter that has never really witnessed violence. But then an all scale invasion breaks out and he witnessed so much carnage and death. So it kind of like puts you in that perspective of him going from like this innocent lifestyle to now being thrown in chaos. So you get to see more of him developing how to cope with so much destruction and so much turmoil as he goes on through the story. And you kind of see his backstory progress as he gets deeper in his journey instead of trying to give it to you all at once and then overshadowing the actual plot of the story. I break it down piece by piece as he grows and develops throughout the story. And then that way it's more digestible instead of trying to force everything down your throat and then I have nothing left to feed you later.
That is an excellent storytelling method. So I'm gonna extrapolate from that a little bit. So your favorite part is being able to, we'll say, take timber for the fire for later, right? Is to set up your plots and have something to draw back on the entire time. I like that. All right, Rebecca, on to yours. What is your favorite part about deciding on who you're going to tell your stories about, right? Or who you're going to focus your anti-corruption rhetoric at? That's one of your favorite focuses, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm always asking whose voices are we hearing and whose story's missing?
Mm.
And everybody thinks they're a main character. And in their own life everybody is a main character, but when we look at sort of how we tell history, who gets to decide what counts as history and whose voices are heard, whose stories are told? And I'm always trying to say, yeah, but there were other people there. There were a lot of other people there whose stories are really important and are very different from the narrative about, who we're naming the roads after. And, so I'm basically, in New York in particular, I write about the history of New York, and I started off writing about who we named the roads after. And then what I realized is what I really should be asking is, who didn't we name roads after and why? Because there were a lot of other people there. And so that's the question that really interests me, is trying to have a much fuller, richer vision of the complicated history that we're all creating together and sharing.
Interesting. Okay, so your favorite part is finding the undiscovered or the minimally discovered, right?
Yeah, and just sort of claiming space for people who've been relegated to the margins.
Interesting. Okay, solid choice. Just as a note, Galatia says, Odie, I love that. What is the backstory of the story and where they have failed in that so far? How will they redeem themselves as they progress? I think are all important points that were brought up, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Next silly question. We're gonna start with Younger again because we make him answer the hard questions. Wahaha.
Let me answer my favorite part.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Let me answer
what's your favorite part of the backstory, Younger? My bad.
My favorite part of the backstory is it kind of goes back to what Rebecca had mentioned, and there has to be like some precedence as to the why they are doing what they are doing, right? Like there had to be some event of some kind, that made that change. In Ode's story, he said that like an all full-scale invasion happened, and then he had to adjust to that. So it's that hardship or primary factor that caused them to change their path from whatever their original setting was, right? Whether it be a war starts or this or that. And one of those, but the part that I think I like to add flavorful of the backstory is like people had lives before the main story. And you could have rivals, right? There could have been, or maybe, there was a big bad guy who came to your town who doesn't remember who you are when you're fighting him at the end of the game or at the end of the story. It's that little guy who was just a little nothing who turned into something important, right? Mm-hmm. And that even happens with real people sometimes. And so bringing those rivals, or having impacts of it into the future stories, because they don't even it doesn't have to be like, it could just be a competitive rivalry between two businesses. It doesn't have to be like, oh, Hatfield and McCoy, bam, bam. But I think adding the rivals to the story is my favorite part.
Interesting. Okay. And I mean, you talked about the big bad evil guy talking to the main character later. I think the best example of this in media that you see is from Street Fighter, the movie, right? M. Bison's giving a monologue. The day that M. Bison graced your village was the greatest and most important day of your life. And for me, it was a Tuesday. That's solidly cements you as a bad guy immediately. Iconic, sure, but bad guy nonetheless. So, and that being another point to draw on, right, is you talked about rivals and pests. Sometimes you can have a positive relationship with your rivals that translates into a story where they become enemies, right? And having those options as a storyteller, right, when you have your players involved with you and talking and so on and so forth, and knowing that you can take those things and twist them into good, bad, ugly in the future is a powerful tool as a storyteller, right? Having them in your back pocket and just be like, hey, here's our flashback from before that you were talking to your friend or school rival or whatever they are in your life, and then look at where they've come without you paying attention. They've snuck up on you. You're getting sucker punch. Surprise! Whether that's a good sucker punch or a bad sucker punches, depending on the story. So going into a more what the benefits are of taking those in, right, and using them. Starting with Rebecca here. After you do some of your research and find where you're at, how does that benefit the larger story on a whole for you? When you go back and find the people in the margins, how does that amplify what you're doing for the rest of what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, like if what we're talking about is, say, pollution in a neighborhood, and we're trying to change things, say we're trying to shut down a power plant or something that is spewing pollutants in the neighborhood, you can talk about, well, this is what the regulation says and you're violating the regulation. But when you start talking about the school that's nearby and the kids who go to the school, and how many of them have asthma, and what it's like for them to try to navigate a day, right? That's incredibly powerful. And that is a way to get the point across of why this is a problem that is much more, I don't know what the word is. It carries a
It
lot more
appeals to the
weight.
humanity in others.
Yeah, like it translates those laws on the paper into why we have them to protect people and who's on the receiving end of the pollution. And in particular, when you combine sort of the stories of the people who are getting sick because of the pollution with a broader social dynamic of how predictably they're going to be poor communities and minority communities, and how sort of the many layers of sort of both oppression and disadvantage that people face, it makes a much more powerful story that can move people's hearts and minds and pocketbooks in a way that just talking about the law doesn't.
Gotcha. I as a personal revelation, years ago when I was in the army, one of our things we had to deal with was safety guidelines and all that fun stuff, and the most of them seemed like BS or common sense, or like, why would you ever have to worry about that? Until someone who had been there forever reminded me that every one of those safety protocols is written in blood. Someone died or got injured for
Exactly.
them to get added, right? So that's kind of a rules across the board, which I think is a pretty powerful thing to remember. But that's a tad bit off subject. Sorry. Jumping down to Lou. Lou, kind of a similar question with your backstories. How do you? I lost the plot here. How do you make sure that you are adding to what you're doing instead of taking away from or over cluttering?
I don't think I understand that question.
So when you're taking your backstories about your clients, how do you make sure that you aren't overpiling too much of their personal stories into what you're trying to brand or help with in the future?
Sure. Okay, get it. So for example, right now I am marketing for a local fundraiser that's happening, and instead of talking about how the charity is amazing and the charity is, the charity, what it does is it provides funds for parents who want to access trauma counseling but don't necessarily have the means to do that. Um, we're It's really like positioning it to be meaningful for people to attend this event, without going into so much like the really terrible effects of parenting with a trauma background and what that can do, but more how people who are attending and donating are benefiting that community.
Gotcha. Okay, so shifting the focus to have a tad bit decluttered on why they're doing it instead of how they're doing it. Okay. Odie, jumping up to you and your characters, right? Um, how do you make sure that they're not overcomplicated, right? Because they're all complex people, right? What do you do to make sure that they're what they did before isn't too much? And I'm gonna give an example just for my sake. When you're playing a D&D character at level 1, if you have a character that is the king of the universe and defeated 4 billion vampires and stopped world hunger 3 times over,
Mhm.
why are you a level 1 character, right? You've added too much story. They're too powerful, too important to just be a random Yahoo going on an adventure. How do you make sure that you kind of don't do that kind of thing with your characters in your stuff?
So I think the straightforward answer would be you make it realistic. I mean, think about it. You're in a full scale, you know, and you're talking, and like your main character, he's somebody that has never experienced violence. Like the worst he has done is taking an animal's life, like having witnessed death. And imagine witnessing death on a large scale, like how that affects you mentally. So like every time he goes outside at night, he's never saying like, "Oh, I'm confident I'm gonna make it back." He's always questioning if it's gonna be the last time. So it's connecting
Mm.
that human emotion to the story and to the characters. Like throughout the story, you see fear, you see pride, you see happiness, you see heartbreak. Like it's so much elements that I add to each of these characters to make you relate to them. So I think making the characters realistic and adding that those human tendencies, like no avoids everything else from making the character be bland out. So I try to make my characters. I try to make people put themselves in my character too. Like this is like you don't know what you would do until you're in that situation. So like everything he's doing, he's winging it. You know, nobody
Mhm.
pops up, just be prepared. So I think for by doing that, it brings a sense to draw people in because they're like, honestly, I think I would do the same. You know, when they read and they get to love these characters because they're so relatable. Like for instance, like one of the main, I guess, antagonists would be the creatures that are invaded. You know, like what makes them so unique is they're actually blind, but how they see if they have a special gland in their nose. It's kind of like if you watch Ben 10 and you know how Walnut sees what he sees by smell, like adding that incorporation, like kind of add like a different factor where they're being hunted by smell and sound instead of being able to be hunted by sight. So it brings a different element to the story because not only do they have to be quiet, but they have to literally, you know, match their smell and be like a hunter that's stalking the prey. So just adding those elements really helps the story build because it adds that uniqueness that kind of puts you outside the box.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. All right. So realistic elements. That's. I mean, it's a simple thing to keep on, right? Again, you can't solve world hunger 3 times and be the pleb at the beginning of a story. Uh, someone's gonna know who you are, generally.
Yes, you
Right?
can. It's called you were reincarnated.
Oh, all
Your
right.
super
Sorry.
powerful body died, and you got
Right.
reincarnated.
All right. That's a fair point, Younger. I guess you could do that.
You've never seen an anime? What's happening?
All right. All right. All right. Okay. So speaking of younger, when you are stepping away from the table itself, right, and you are conversing with the players to make these backstories, how do you handle it when someone is not forthcoming with their story, whether they have figured out what their story is or they just like only wrote a sentence or two? How do you kind of handle those mm, regressive style stories? And then after that answer, flip note, how do you do someone that has 7 pages worth of backstory that, we'll say they kept it realistic,
Okay,
but.
gotcha. So I'm actually gonna hit on what Odie said, and he said, keep it realistic, but on a different element. Everybody at some point had a parental. You came from somewhere, right? Everybody came from somewhere, and so if you're a normal human, most people like have like 2 parents and are biologically produced. Um, and so like, who is your family ties? So each character has a family tie. Okay, does your character have parents? What happened to your parents? Are they living their normal lives? Did they tragically die like in Batman? Do you have any siblings? If you do, like how many sisters, how many brothers, so on and so forth. And they each have their own lives. And just it doesn't have to be super in depth, but just like basically like who they are, what they do, and what is their age? Like where are you in that scale? Were you the little brother or were you the oldest brother? Like where was your role like in the family as well as like maybe you were an apprentice of your father, and that's how you learned your particular skill set or something like that. And so it's building on little things like that. And that's like, okay, well, are you from a big town? Are you from a little town? Are you in the sticks? Are you an orphan? Just like little elements like that to be like, hey, like where did you actually come from? Because in D&D, it's basically like, oh, choose a thing and then choose another thing, and then that's it, and we won't worry about it unless you buy this other book that goes into like 15 additional pages of content. And so it's literally just being like, hey, how old are you? If you're this old, you probably had a little bit more time to experience life, right? Like if you're 30,
Yeah.
like and you're playing the game, like you probably have like went to some field of study. Like you might have went to a community college or a wizard college, already graduated. But if you're younger, you might just first be attending a wizard college or something, or not even. and so it's like, where's your age and how much life experience have you had before this point?
Solid. So,
And for the people who have too much,
thank you.
It's more, instead of just deleting stuff, it's more like, hey, I'm not going to be able to personally memorize all of what you have written. I'm going to go over it, and then I'm going to say that this is okay for the storyline, or it doesn't make sense because of your level, and like maybe take that out. But if it's just like just too much information, but it's not like, I mean, imagine if somebody wrote a biography about you and they wrote literally every single thing you did every single day. It would be way longer than 10,000 pages. People only write biographies about the important things that happened. They don't care about what you did on the third Tuesday 7 weeks ago if you didn't invent electricity. So it's just like, take the bullet point pieces and be like, hey, so this is your character backstory, and out of this 3 paragraphs that you wrote, I'm going to write like you were a part of a frog cult.
You and your frog.
It's
I'm gonna.
Yeah, so that's what I have to do.
I was gonna
right?
say,
That's,
Rebecca, you were
yeah.
nodding along. You look like you had something to add on.
Yeah.
What you got?
Well, that's sort of like when I was writing Naming Gotham about the people we named stuff after, that was exactly what I had to do, and was take, thousands of pages about people and condense it down to here's what makes this person interesting. And, sometimes it is what you did on that random Tuesday because, it's a good expression of who you are. But it's also the minutia, like the little gossipy facts that make you different from some other random person your age in that place who has, 2 parents or 1 parent and is the oldest child. Like it's the details that make you unique that I think are the really interesting parts, and that help show that everybody, I said this before, but like everybody's the main character in their own story. And I live in New York City. There are 8 million of us all living our own story, but there's a broader story that emerges from that I think is really interesting.
Nice. I'm gonna look up a word really quick just because there's a fantastic German word that is the sudden realization of that you are not the only person living their life at the at that moment, that everyone is their own main character.
That's not real. That's not real.
Is it real?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I will find it later because it'll take me 5 minutes to do that search, but that's okay. But yeah, that's a wonderful psych term that is used all the time for that, that sudden realization that like everyone else is living their own lives just like you, right? For it's kind of that realization of when you go from a kid to an adult and then you get to really see what your parents went through, and that sudden realization of they were just winging it as they needed to. Odie, you kind of brought this up with your character. He kind of just wings things and goes through it like a real human. That's the real human experience. We can all agree that 99% of the time we are winging it to do our best, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Until you've experienced it, then you know if that was the right choice or not.
Right. That or the wrong choice.
I really messed up my oil change because I forgot to, unscrew the screw on the pan. Oops. Guess I have to do it again. That's real life me talking.
I was gonna say that was last week. Jumping down to Lou really quick. Oh, she ran away. Now she's back. As soon as she was interrupted, I got her. The dog says we're playing now.
I'm squeaky toy.
It's all good. So when you're dealing with your clients, how do you, I'm going to kind of pose the same question that I posed to you, but more of in your realm of things. What do you do with a client when they don't give you enough information, where they are kind of the we'll say white bread of companies or whatever, where they just don't have a cool story? How do you either pull it out of them or augment what they have to make it better?
A couple of different ways. I might go hunting for that information myself. An example of that is I marketed for an excavation company, and if I just happened to see them on jobs around town, I would, talk to the workers and take photos and videos and that sort of thing, and just kind of gather that information as I went. And then other times I will simply say, I am not going to be able to effectively do this job unless you give me what I'm asking for. And so I'm willing to send off like a questionnaire and a survey and, have you fill that out. I will jump on Zoom with you and interview you. But however we can extrapolate those details that I need, we do it. And I have been known also to send out emails that just say, I'm blank and there's nothing available to me, so somebody better give me something quick. And you can also take a piece of media and use it several different ways. It can be, something newsy, and then it can be a meme, and then it can be part of a carousel that is going to be some kind of fun joke at the end or informational. There's lots of different ways to reuse what you already have.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm gonna ask a follow-up question, but to answer the comment in the chat, yes, Sonder was the word I was looking for. That's the English one that is basically what I was talking about. There's another one that's like even deeper than that. That's like like the actual coming to the realization for it instead of just the feeling of it. But Sonder works great. That's a great word for it. So, Lou, secondary question, kind of again with the same track of Youngers, is what if you get a client that just has too much, just so much stuff that is like, I can't talk about all this, and most of it isn't relevant.
That's pretty much my job, is to pick out the relevant stuff. So I get to sift and get to go through and yeah, just like that, right? Like and sometimes that is, it's relevant because I have a great idea, and sometimes it's relevant because it's actually information that people need to know about this brand or company.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, that's easy peasy. Odie, a really simple question for you: how do you quantify a character deserving to get named in your stories? Right? How do you determine when someone deserves a backstory?
So I think it depends on like the build up.
Okay.
So a point in the story to where like you feel that this is important to incorporate to, I guess, better explain the character. Like it might just be a point in time where they return home or they have a certain memory or are facing a certain obstacle. But I feel like it's important to know how to slide it in there, but also know how to keep it fluent. So I think that is probably like my best answer to say on that.
Okay, gotcha. So I again follow up question: does every character that you write have a backstory that isn't quite revealed until it's necessary, or is it kind of like it just the appropriate timing and then we make a backstory and go from there?
So it just depends on the character. Like for
Okay.
instance, like certain characters have a backstory already incorporated. So you don't really have to guess too much on them because the way they are written into the story kind of hints at their backstory. But I always give them one because my thing is I don't like being predictable. I don't like you said, a guy that's conquered and defeated thousands of armies and at the deity level, and it's like, okay, his backstory probably is that he was just the best and never is unbeaten. But he comes to the realization that he's not the greatest. He faced the adversary and he loses, so he's on a quest to redeem himself. Something along the line predictable as that. For me, I like to keep it like on par, as in you can understand, but I also want you to get the backstory. Like I don't want to just make it obvious. But then once I reveal it, a lot of times people don't even understand how I even got close to that backstory because the way I write characters, I want every character to have its own uniqueness. And the one thing I like what Rebecca said is I think everybody wants to be the main character, but don't realize that the main character is most of the time only as good as a supporting character. Like for instance, like Ash and Pikachu. Like without Pikachu, Ash would not have made it in a lot of his journey. But of course, Ash is the spotlight because he's the main character. But without the supporting characters on the way, it wouldn't have painted such a vivid, memorable story of Ash. So it's just learning to incorporate that at certain times, but also give people their spotlight when it's needed and learning when it's not needed.
Okay, I mean that is the problem with the storyteller, right? Is giving your character someone to bounce off of and foil. I think Pokemon's a great
Can I
example.
hit that?
You can after I finish speaking. Wahaha. But I think that's a great example because Misty and Brock are excellent foils for Ash. He meets them relatively early on, and they serve to expand his character. Right? They show that he can be snarky, or that he can care for things, or that he's observant. Right? From their failings or their snarkiness or whatever. And without them, he would just be a dude traveling around with a little mouse. You know what I mean? There wouldn't be as much of a fun story. And again, there's a whole bunch of those characters that go throughout the entire show. But him and his whoever his side characters are for the season, fantastic example there again. Younger.
Feel like just giving a brief title to a character, right? Like if it's an unnamed character, the guardsman. Sometimes just saying the guardsman, you know enough about their backstory. You know that they protect the town. That's all you have to know. They'll arrest you if you break the law. The king. He probably comes from a long line of prestigious blah blah blah, and you can even write like a paragraph about it and then move on with the rest of the story and never worry about it again. And then every time you mention the king, people will be like, "Oh yeah, that thing that I mentioned like forever ago." Sometimes it's just that, that simple, just giving them a little rather than necessarily like just give them an adjective, or a descriptor. Be like the blue dude.
Hey, look, the blue dude is memorable. Every time you see him in the background, hey, that guy's important. He'll be back later. Speaking of a good example of that, the cabbage cart guy from Avatar, The Last Airbender, one of the fantastic example. You know the cabbage guy. He's going to be there. Things are going to happen to his cart. You're ready for it. You're excited. Okay. So kind of on to the good and the bads for some of these, right? We're going to start with Lou. Lou, what is your least favorite memory of dealing with a client that didn't have a good story to tell?
I once had a client, and this client was a children's cooking class teacher, and very bubbly and dynamic in that role, but kind of took over her own social media once and went live, curled up under the covers, talking about how sad and depressed she was and how her life was going downhill, which is not the best for marketing to parents and children and that sort of thing. And I did have to take that all down and explain to her that that was not the story we wanted to be telling, and maybe there was a better outlet for her to find to tell that story in, and even volunteered like, hey, you know what, we can hop on the phone and you can talk to me, but having that go out there public on your business account is not necessarily optimal.
That's a solid bit of information for anyone that's a content creator. If you're gonna have a freak out, know where you're posting things. Digital footprints last forever. An important thing to know is
dude off screen.
Right? Talk to your friends, not to the internet. Okay. Jumping back to Odie. Odie, what was your least favorite character that you've crafted so far? Whether it's to write about them and you need them around, or just like something you made and we're just like, ugh, gross.
So I think the character that I probably struggle with the most, um, I'm gonna say probably my character in the story. His name is Bruni. Just because the way that he's so flashy and like such a pretty boy that like when I first thought of him, I was like, how can I make this character interesting? How can I take him from being a flashy pretty boy and make him interesting? So as I kind of dug deeper into his character, I was like, well, what are some characteristics that would make him seem down to, I guess, the level of everybody else? And I had to add, like I said, realist characteristics. It's not so much that he's so confident; it's the fact that he's always been living in such fear that his fear became fear your list. So in order to attack each day and not be afraid, he puts on a persona that, I have to be bold. I have to be a standout. So it's like he became the opposite of what he feared. So he took his disadvantages of constantly being in a state of fear and turned that into a positive. So, just writing him like that made me it was very hard because the character kind of reminded me so much of like you love Gojo, but sometimes you hate you hate so much how cocky he is. But then you understand like behind all the flashiness, he's down to earth a human. He's indeed afraid of certain elements. But it's just that learning to read behind the lines, and that's why I made him such the character he is. It's like you actually pay attention to him, you understand that he has just as many flaws as everybody else. But only difference is he's not going to let you see it. He's going to show you what you need to see, but not what you want to see. And that's such a hard character to write. But I have it's like a love and hate relationship between it.
You know what? I feel that wholeheartedly. There's lots of characters that are like needed for a story, but are just horrible to deal with. Um, whether it's to do them well enough to where they're enjoyable, or just to bring them up as subjects. Um, but okay. Last but not least, Rebecca, what was your least favorite case to kind of go over for your most recent book that you were working on?
So I the book is about it's called Naming Gotham. I'm telling you the name because it matters.
Right.
The villains, rogues, and heroes behind New York place names, and there's some real villains. Like the clearest example, the person that I grew to really despise as I wrote this book was a guy named Richard Riker. And Rikers Island is named after his family. Rikers Island is New York City's main jail. It is a place of horror. It is, in the words of the former chief judge of the state, a stain on the city, irredeemable, and it must be closed. And it's going to be closed in 2027 under, by law, it has to be. But it turns out that the family is sort of steeped in villainy back from the earliest days of the Dutch settlement of New Amsterdam. They were enslavers. They made a fortune off of the stolen labor of enslaved people. They then parlayed that into political prominence and social prominence. And as recorder of the city, which is like a judge, Richard Riker, who was like fourth generation in maybe, enforced the Fugitive Slave Act. And that was right in the run up to the Civil War. There were these federal laws that required states that had outlawed slavery to still use the machinery of the state to capture people who liberated themselves from slavery and then send them back. And that's bad enough. And he did that willingly and maybe even happily. But even worse, he had this scheme with the chief of police and a couple other major political figures to grab random Black people off the street, deny them their right of habeas corpus to prove that they were in fact free New Yorkers, and send them into slavery, which is, the most evil thing I can imagine, pretty much. And so I'm writing about this guy, and as I'm writing about him, I'm like, man, I really hate him. But I think it's an important story to tell. And so I was trying to tell it in a way that people would read it and not be like, oh, she's just off her rocker, but like read what actually happened and why it matters, not just to understand history, but also because, right, we're engaged right now in a struggle with regard to the jail on Rikers Island that's about mass incarceration and profound injustice that is racialized just along the same lines that Rikers' work was in the run-up to the Civil War. So that's a very long-winded answer to say that I hate Richard Riker.
Noted. The only good Riker is on Star Trek. Got it. All right, good. I got laughter out of it. That's all I care about. So,
That's dark.
right? But you know what? That's important stuff to know. You know what I mean? Without knowing it, we won't have an understanding of why things are the way they are. So that's appreciated nonetheless.
Yeah.
Younger. your turn. What's your least favorite backstory you've ever written for a character?
Awesome. My very first character I ever played in D&D. The character, fine. I created an overpowered villain for said character. That was essentially a god. And my character was just had a negative consequence of that god's actions, and was like, I'm gonna curse that dude, curse him, and then fast forward like 9 years of my life, it took that long before that villain in that universe got what they deserved. And it was not my original or my second or my third. It was like my 27th character, got to witness it. Having no concept of the prior history as to, why he was even the bad guy. It was just like, he's a bad guy for all these other reasons, because like history, people continue to do things as they live, and they can continue to do bad things long after other people had a heart attack.
I mean,
so
to be fair, your
that
original character
character,
did also get to watch his demise as well, just not firsthand.
but that character in particular haunted the campaign, because it was like, wow, I created such a good villain. I hate him so much. I never want to see it again.
Fantastic character. I loved it. But
Is my least favorite.
but okay, cool. Let's jump to the opposite side of things. What's the most positive character that you've applied a background to? So again, we're going to start with Odie here. Odie, who has been your favorite person to write about? Who's been your best? Like, all right, every time I write about this dude, I'm just hype.
So I think to answer that question, like probably my favorite, it's kind of two people.
Okay.
So one character in particular is the character. Her name is Rika. So she's kind of that chaotic, crazy character, but she means well. So she has that tendency where it's like a fireball, but you can see glimpses of her like humanity come in. The reason why I love writing about this character is because she has such a unique backstory. She's this orphan that got turned into this prototype killing machine. But the part that I love about her is it's her humanity side of her never changed. So as she's doing what she was trained to do, she always fight with her self-conscious as in, is this morally right or wrong? Even though she was taught to do this at such a young age, it's like she battles with that compass of, am I supposed to do this? This is what it's supposed to feel like. Am I supposed to connect with that emotional feeling regret for taking a life? So it's like she constantly struggled with that and found her strength within that to leave and get out of it to start a life of her own, start making decisions that she felt was better, moral. So just that character itself just had so much character development. I love writing for them because it's like each chapter and each part of the season, you see her shift more and you see a better side of her. So that's one character. Another character is like you said, he's a rival towards the main character. His name is Muse, and he's just dead set on just being. He had so much pressure from him at a young age. His father basically goes missing, and he's the next in line to rule a kingdom. But he doesn't necessarily want to rule them out of respect for his father. He feels like he can't live up to his shoes, but everybody else sees him as and he's ready to be prepared, but he knows deep down inside that he might not be able to step up to the plate. So he kind of comes off as this arrogant, bashful guy that thinks he knows what he's doing, but at the same time, you can see that he's just winging it. He's trying his best to not only cope with everything that's going on, but trying to find his way to step up to be a leader. But he still struggles with what all of us is his own worst enemy is his mind. He thinks that he's not prepared to do it, but he never gets a chance to put himself in that situation to see if he can adapt. So just writing with him just helped me like really fall in love with his character because you kind of see the same thing as in it's always that constant moral battle. It's like he wants to do good and he wants to please, not only his father's legacy, but also to please the people that account on him, but you see that he's still growing because he's grown too long. I mean, he's 18, you know, so he's having the whole world depend on him. Really, a whole kingdom is looking up to him, and he's still trying to figure out and grasp, who he is. So it's like trying to figure out yourself, but also trying to figure out how to help others. So it's a very interesting character.
Nice. Okay. I could see how that'd be super fun to write about. Younger.
So, I just wanted to tack onto that. So, I don't know. I'm looking at it from that realistic standpoint. If you have like a moral dilemma in your life, or at least for myself, or I come across a problem that I don't know how to fix, I'll try to imagine what a mentor, or somebody I respect would do if they were in that same position. Like, hey, what is the right thing? Or if I need to be courageous, I might think about like, okay, well, who's the courageous people who were in my life, right? Who I can spawn inspiration of and try to mimic that element in order to fake it until you make it. Because until you actually do it, it's gonna be fake, right? Like you're gonna be scared or whatever. If you've never been a leader, you're not gonna be one until you actually stand up and try to do it, but you're not gonna be confident in doing so unless you're just like wrapped up in a particular emotion like anger or whatever, in which case that's not being a leader, that's just you reacting in a particular manner and people standing behind you. As opposed to like actually standing up and doing the thing. And so you might look to be like, hey, what would my dad do? What would my grandfather do? What would my war hero grandpa do if he was here seeing on the battlefield that I am in today? Like how could I be like him and overcome that?
Yeah, I think like in the story itself, the reason why he struggles so much, Muse does, is because everybody see him as his father. Like his father has all these accolades, this great ruler, this power, like all these accolades that overshadows him. So he struggles with the concept of they're seeing me through his lenses and not seeing me as who I am. I'm developing into my own person. So it's like everybody expects him to be great, and he's like, what if I fail? So it's like that realistic fear of like, what if I fail to meet the expectation of someone else? And how do I fail and still succeed to become what they need? So it's like him learning how to decipher between, what is truly a failure and what is truly a lesson. So it's just like he's battling with that at such a young age. And it's like you see him grow, you get to understand that, sometimes it's not about how you attack the situation. It's about what do you apply to the situation.
Nice.
Absolutely. It's also like
Younger. I gotta
on top
I gotta cut you off. We're running low on time here. So sorry to cut off that part, but I want to ask our other two their favorites on what they've done recently. So we're gonna go down to Lou. Lou, who's been your favorite client recently, or just in general that you can have a fun story about?
I don't know if I can tell you that.
Oh, okay. Well,
name drop.
we respect
My
NDAs
clients
here as
will
much as we
listen
can.
to this.
Maybe a favorite rather than the
A
favorite.
favorite.
Yeah,
A favorite experience most recently has been again marketing for this event that is coming up next week. But it's really I work with the committee of this event called A Toast to You, and it's made up of mostly therapists plus me. I'm not a therapist, but I know a lot now after working with multiple therapists in my career. But the way that they are very tech video illiterate, but they are putting themselves out there and making these videos and telling people what this charity means to them and what the journey fund means for the people of our community and that sort of thing. And it's just so beautiful and heartwarming to see them put aside like the I don't know and that timidness of being on video because of something that they have big love for, right? Like it's a really beautiful thing to be in and experience.
Nice. Okay. I mean, at a minimum, that's uplifting and exciting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone involved is going to feel good at the end of it, as long as things don't explode, because that's always the worst. Rebecca,
That's
jump
always
in.
the worst when something explodes. Yeah.
You
It's
know
a
what
real
happens?
bummer.
Damages.
It happens. You know what I mean? The best laid plans.
I'm
Rebecca.
in Canada though. It doesn't happen as often
Okay,
for
well that's
us.
good. Rebecca, how about you? When you were doing for your last book? Was there anyone in there that you were just like, I love this person? They should have got more screen time in the theme of life.
Yeah, so there's this guy who I really became very fond of, named Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And there's a street named after him in Harlem. He was the first Black man elected from New York to Congress, one of two at the time. There were no Black women, and these were the first, like, he was elected in the 50s, and he went to segregated Washington, and he would take his staff, many of whom were people of color, into restaurants, and he would just basically dare them to kick him out. There was a segregationist guy, I can't remember his name, who was flipped out when Powell won and said, well, I'm not going to sit next to him. And so Adam Clayton Powell just made a point of sitting next to the guy, Rankin was his name, sitting next to him in Congress every single time he could. And sometimes Rankin would get up and move, and Powell would move too. And I loved that image of this sort of, tiny white segregationist man fleeing from this incredibly charismatic, really just brilliant man who did. And one quick little story about him. I know we're out of time, but so Adam Clayton Powell had this rider that he tried to attach to every law in every committee that he was in, and the rider that he tried to attach simply said that no federal funds could be used for any program that discriminated on the basis of race or national origin. And it was shot down every single time, and it became known as the Powell Amendment. It was a completely quixotic campaign that he ran, until it became Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. And, I try to remember that. Like, you can win. You can fight and lose and fight and lose and win.
Nice. That's again, a very positive note. I like that. It sounds like someone that would be enjoyable to hang out with at a minimum.
He also was really into music, and he recorded an album or two. He was just such a colorful, fascinating guy, and very handsome.
Noted.
Important.
Hey, you know what? It's hard being famous when you're ugly.
There better be a picture in the book. You said that now.
Right, there better be a side note at the reference, something like that.
There's a picture. You can see him.
Okay. Well, yeah. Again, positive about historical figures is we can now look at the ones that were in the last century, at least, right? So just because we have to wrap it up, I have 4 billion more things to talk about, but we're over an hour at this point. So we're gonna do final thoughts, and then one more time of where people can find you, what you're working on, all that fun stuff. So we're gonna start with the ladies first on final thoughts. When you guys are thinking about taking your quote unquote backstories that you're picking through or picking out, what are your kind of thoughts about using them, or how you plan to use them in the future? And we'll start with Rebecca's.
Well, one thing that has really struck me in listening to Lou and Odie and Younger and you is how much our narratives converge. And, the thing that I really enjoy about having these kinds of conversations is just remembering that, like, from a lot of different perspectives, we're really engaged in the same sort of struggle to create meaning in a world where that can be very challenging, and to create a pathway forward. And so that's what I'm always trying to do, and that's sort of what I use backstories for, is because it helps you think about, okay, well, what's the way forward? And that's, forward's where we need to go.
Forward's where we need to go. Solid statement. Lou, down at the bottom there.
Final thoughts. I think our backstories are something, number one, that we get to engage with in different ways as we explore and play with them. And it's very interesting to look at your backstory in a different light sometimes. And also our backstories get to inspire future things. And that is very exciting too.
Nice.
So whether it's future things in you or future things for other people, we get to own our stories and kind of see them in different lights, and like they're multifaceted. So I love that part about it.
I 100% agree. That is probably some of the fun stuff, especially receiving it from other people. You know what I mean? Getting the stories from other people that they give you and get to play with, the best. Odie, last but not least, what are your final thoughts?
Same thing, I think that it is interesting listening to everybody. Is that I think backstories really do encompass who you are as a person. I feel like too many times people see us as just characters as gods, or as immortal or untouchable, but don't realize that, a lot of characters fail many times to succeed, or a lot of characters are actually not as high on the pedestal as you think they are. It's just they have went through so much experience and gained so much knowledge that they seem like they're so far but reach, but they're really not. So seeing their backstory kind of helps you bring them closer to you and realize that your reality isn't that much different. It's just parallel. You know, it's just within orange reach. It's just certain things that makes them different. So I think when you tell a great backstory, it's kind of like they always say, it don't matter how people can step in one spot, but it's only going to be a footprint that's going to match you. So that backstory just kind of helps glue and signify those characters in a special way.
Nice. Okay, that's solid. Younger, I would.
I have to add a real.
Oh, okay. I will give you 10 seconds. Add your thing, Yankees.
Okay, so I'd like to hit on what Lou said. Backstories in a different light. There's the saying that history is written by the victor, right? But there's always quote unquote two sides of the story. But if we look at us as individuals, your mother and father are going to have a different image of you in their head than your siblings, or than your neighbor, or than your best friend, or than your enemy. They each will have a unique perspective as to who you are, and what your backstory is. Somebody might idolize you as being the ultimate hero, or you might be their ultimate villain. You might be that knowledgeable person who knows how to handle a particular situation, or you might be that freaking idiot who doesn't understand proper grammar or etiquette and stuff. And so your backstory, even though you have the overall one, each person only gets a particular piece of the pie as to that in its entirety. You don't get to see the full perspective at any one time. And I think that that's an important thing to remember, both in your real life and in a storytelling essence.
Fantastic. You can always tell the same story 100 times, and it can be different every single time. Okay, so before we get out of here, we got to do our fun last bit promos here. So we're going to start with Odie. Odie, where do people find you? Any projects you're working on that they need to know about, that kind of thing.
So currently, right now, I just released the first episode of season 2. You can find it on Webtoons. You can look up the actual title of it. The title of my manga is called Gamma Blue, The Smoldering of Krill. Or look up my creator name, which is OdieBear117. It's also on the Duck Web Comics, and you just look up the same title, Gamma Blue, The Smoldering of Krill. You can find me on Facebook at Eyeball Productions. You also can find me on Instagram at Eyeball Productions.
Can't miss them. They got a cool looking bear logo.
Love Halo.
What?
He said Odie Bear 117. That's Master Chief's number.
That's it's one of my favorite games of all time. So
okay, good.
I had to show.
I missed that. Apparently, I was like, "What are you talking about Halo for, you weirdo?" Okay, that makes one.
It's part of his backstory.
Okay. Sorry, I missed it. I didn't pull that out of it. Yeesh. We're going full circle here.
It was on page 17.
Anyway, Rebecca.
So my website is just my name, RebeccaBratspees.com. You can find out about my scholarship there, my teaching, the book about New York, the environmental justice comic books that we didn't really get to talk about, but are super cool and are available for free download for any nonprofit or educational use. I'm also R. Bratspees on most social media. I love to hear from people, so I'd love to hear from whoever.
Fantastic. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy. And hey, if we need to talk about it more, you can always just come back later. You know what I'm saying? But self-promotion aside, Lou.
My website is loubowers.com. Once you hit that, you can actually grab a free resource called All Eyes on You, and it is a guide to help you get more visibility for your business. As well, on any social media, pretty much, I am Lou Bowers Visibility Expert.
Fantastic. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And then for our stuff, this month is still October, so it's still spooky 907 on the website to get your 10% off almost everything on there. If you've stuck through this and you're watching this on YouTube later, feel free to subscribe. We appreciate all subscribers. If you're watching on Twitch, check us out. Find all the other fun things under Epic Sages. And then for those of you that are up in the Fairbanks area, we have the Monroe Bazaar tomorrow. It's a one-day event. I will be causing havoc from like 9 to 7, I think is the time frame for it, at Monroe, selling all the stuff and the things, setting up games, all that fun stuff. You know how he is. We have important fun company thing is we're starting our Power Rangers TTRPG Session 0, Session 1 next Monday. It's coming rapidly. I'm prepared. I got the lore all memorized now. Just kidding. There's way too much. 29 seasons worth of stuff. I'm not even through season 3 yet. But and then Star Wars on Wednesday next week. With all that, with Adventure in mind, have a wonderful time. Before I say goodbye, for our 3 guests here, you guys get to give me a number between 1 and 10, and that'll be our exit music. Whoever says it first.
7.
7.
2.
Too slow. We got 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, okay. Interesting. All right. Anyway, with Adventure in mind, have a wonderful time. Stick around for music. Bye.
Bye.
In the lands where honor reigns and shadows fall with heavy chains, under the sun of rising dawn, where fields of earth stand firm and strong, the farmer toils, the samurai swears to protect their land from all despairs. But shadows creep unseen by day, the dark within won't fade away. From the mountain's heart, the uneasy rise with whispers cold in silent skies. Earth is our shield, unbroken, unmoved, through ancient battles honor proved. But beneath the calm there's a roar, the coming storm of ancient war. 5 rings circle the world we defend, earth, water, fire, air they blend into the void where spirits cry. In Rokugan we live and die. Clans will rise and shadows fall, but the rings unite and guide us all. Against the dark we stand as one, in the battle we become the sun. Water flows from stream to sea, bringing life to you and me. But in its depths the danger lies, the serpent waits beneath the tides. The merchant sails the Ronin roam, while storms of war strike close to home. The spirits stir uneasy cold, in every drop a story told. Water's the path, ever changing yet true, through chaos and calm it renews. But from the depths the dark emerges, on every tide the shadow surges. 5 rings circle the world we defend, earth, water, fire, air they blend into the void where spirits cry. In Rokugan we live and die. Clans will rise and shadows fall, but the rings unite and guide us all. Against the dark we stand as one, in the battle we become the sun. fire's flame, it warms and burns in every heart. The ember turns, the forge of war, the clash of steel, a deadly force we cannot heal. Air whispers with secrets veil through every court. The truth assail, but it's the void, the silent call that binds us to the spirit's thrall. The people kneel beneath the stars, praying peace to end the scars. The clans they fight with all their might, but evil hides beyond their sight. Corruption seeps from twisted lands with demon claws and tainted hands. The Shadowlands rise to claim our kin, but the Five Rings guard what lies within. Five rings circle the world we defend. Earth, water, fire, air, they blend into the void where spirits cry. In Rokugan we live and die. Clans will rise and shadows fall, but the rings unite and guide us all. Against the dark we stand as one. In the battle we become the sun. So hear the call, people brave, for every soul that we must save. In Rokugan the reigns remain, our strength, our bond despite the pain.
Epic.
Okay.
All right,
Sages.
bye.